Hello, everyone. Good evening. Carl Steinbeck here, back tonight to talk about the Massachusetts versus Karen Reed case. And the reason we jumped on tonight here is to be able to talk about the thing that still I think about much of the day ever since I saw this. And it's just so shocking, the fact that this Judge Cannone is keeping out an expert to talk about the botched police procedures. Defense has a constitutional right to present a defense, and she's effectively gutting the defense and just wholesale allowing the prosecution to run roughshod over the rights of Karen Reed. This case has become so absurd, so outlandish. I only want to cover cases that really cry out and scream out for justice. And when you have the actual government being the one that's a perpetrator of the unjust treatment of others, it really makes my blood boil. And this is the reason I'm following this case. And I want to follow it, share with you some of the background things on how this can go so sideways, how it can be so much a manifest railroad job against Karen Reed, trampling and crushing her constitutional rights. That every citizen in Massachusetts should be concerned, because this could happen to you. The politics machine up there is unprecedented. You won't find anything more of a stranglehold to just absolutely pummel and pulverize people's rights. So with that background, I wanted to bring out tonight a special guest. I've never had a guest on here before. And the officer I have here standing by, he has actually offered to come on this case and help out discussing these issues on this botched investigation, because you know what? You'll never hear it from a defense witness based on this unjust, radical, out of control, lawless judge. So what I'm going to do now is introduce to you someone who has many years of experience. And this is a trooper that wishes to remain anonymous. We will call him Carolina because he is a retired North Carolina State Patrol officer who, without further ado, sir, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself to the guests. I know you've made a lot of comments on the channel. I know you've been on some other shows as well. If you could give a quick snapshot of your kind of background before we start discussing things that could have been done better on this case.
Thanks, Carl. I appreciate you having me on. I really do appreciate it. I was a state trooper for 30 years here in North Carolina. I investigated thousands of motor vehicle crashes, somewhere around maybe 150 fatalities. Our main job is investigating motor vehicle crashes. I have a Bachelor of Science degree in criminal justice, and I'm not going to sit back and not say anything when I see things that shouldn't be done or wasn't done that should have been done. So I'm here just to speak out with you.
Well, I appreciate that, because I think most all citizens want to feel safe and secure in their community, and we want to make sure that police are targeting the right people. We want to make sure there's not some kind of dragnet operation where innocent people can be caught up in a system that does not follow the Constitution and the rights that are afforded both in state and federal, the U.S. Constitution. So I appreciate your willingness to come on, and the way you've supported the channel earlier with adding a lot of commentary. So having you to actually hear your voice here is a real honor, and I appreciate you on here, sir. And with your background, gosh, you've come across 150 fatalities on accident scenes in your 30 years. That's quite a number. So we'll get into some of that as well in terms of the injuries to John O'Keefe, and in that relation to the Lexus vehicle that Karen Reed was driving. So let me ask you first, though, before we get into some of the details, how long have you been following this case, sir?
I followed it when it first started on the first trial, and I followed it all the way to the end.
All right. And what did basically, from your background, when you saw that first trial, what kind of things are jumping out at you that you thought were not consistent with proper police investigation techniques and procedures?
Well, there were several. Not securing the crime scene, not interviewing witnesses, not searching the house, not taking pictures. And when I saw his arm, at that moment, I knew right then that was not caused by a motor vehicle crash backing up. That's
Wow.
when that really caught my eye when I saw his arm.
Right. Yeah, that's those arm injuries are really telling. And so of the I guess how many accidents did you say you've come across where there's actually bodily injury to people's arms, where there's actually bruising and cuts and whatnot? How many could you put even a number on that? You've seen so many?
I can't put a number on. I've had, like I said, probably close to 150 pedestrian either injury or fatality. So I just can't put a number on it. But most of them, if not all, had bruising, and it was just a mess. I'll put it to you that way. It was a mess.
Right. So we'll get into some more of the injuries and the tail light later, sir. But can you you mentioned some things that they botched. They failed to secure the crime scene. So the can you describe why that is important?
Yes,
as a law
because you
enforcement
have to.
officer?
Yes, because you have to preserve the evidence. You have to put crime scene tape up all around that residence. You have to interview people. You got a dead body in a gentleman's front yard, so you need to be asking questions. You need to have people writing written statements. You need to have them in the front seat of your patrol car, and it needs to be videotaped. It's very, very critical. The first 48 hours is the most important time when you're investigating something such as this.
Right. I remember that 48-hour thing. The judge was sustaining the objections that I think was it Alan Jackson was asking about the 48-hour mark being critical, and Lally was objecting, and she sustained those. That kind of thing didn't come in, as I recall. So even something rudimentary like that, the prosecutor's objecting to, and the judge is keeping that kind of stuff out.
I saw that, and I was amazed that she sustained that objection. I mean, unbelievable, Carl.
Yeah, I feel like this is outcome oriented, and this is just a speed bump to get Karen Reed conviction.
Yes, I agree.
That there's political dealings that need to be cashed in. There's connections at the highest levels to make sure this happens, and that's why the this case I believe was in. Do you think it was intentionally not even investigated correctly from the get-go?
I'll put it to you this way. And the way they investigated it would be the way me as a cadet 32 years ago would have investigated it and hadn't known anything about how to investigate any type of murder or whatever. Yes, it was intentional. Within 16 hours, he's ready to charge her. I mean, what's the hurry? You got plenty of time. You've only interviewed three people. What
do you think, Trooper? The fact that you had the body laying there in the ground, and nobody took any photos from any of the attending law enforcement personnel.
I would have. Well, when I got there, and I saw the body, the first thing I would have done is got my digital camera, and I would have let EMS do what they had to do, but I would have stepped back and I would have took pictures of where his body is exactly located.
Would you also put markers down to show where the body was, so that you can tie that into where other things are found at the scene?
Yes, and also I'll go even a step further. Once the body is moved, we would have had tents set up all across that yard. Once we got the search warrant, and we would have had heaters upon heaters upon heaters, and we would have melted all of that snow. So when we turned that house back over to the owners, we would have had all the evidence we needed. It might take a week, it might take 2 weeks, but we would have melted all of that snow and gathered any evidence that may or may not be there.
Right. What do you think of the fact that they have the lack of any photos of the body there, and they're saying that the because it wasn't secured, they were able to go back numerous different times. In fact, it came out recently that it was undocumented in any police report other than entry logs for evidence collection that Trooper Proctor went back there 5 other times to try to find pieces, and actually said he found pieces of the tail light there in that front yard. What do you think about that, sir?
Well, they should have done everything when the body was there, when the body left. I mean, you know, I think a lieutenant and the former chief drove by, 12 days later, and found 45 pieces of a tail light, in the front yard. Come on.
What about the chain of custody aspects and how they collected evidence in solo cups and put it in a grocery bag? Is there any excuse for that, even if it's snowy out and they're saying, it's going to melt in the snow? Keep in mind, it was 12 degrees when they found John O'Keefe's body there, well below freezing.
Well, if they had evidence bags and equipment in their vehicle like we do, they could use cotton swabs, and they could have swabbed the blood with one cotton swab, put it in the envelope, swabbed another one, put it in the envelope. That's what I would have done.
Have you ever heard of law enforcement officers using solo cups and shopping bags to collect evidence as part of a murder scene?
Never.
What do you make of, can you explain to the jury why chain of custody is important?
Yeah.
Evidence collection.
Yeah. I'll give you an example. It's real simple. It's easy to do. Okay. Say you're involved in a crash, Carl, and I expect that you're impaired. So I go to the hospital. I take my blood kit in with me. I read you your rights. There's 2 vials in that kit, and it's sealed. So I get a nurse to come in and draws the blood. She puts it back in the kit. She signs off on the paperwork. I seal it up with an evidence tape. I go straight to the office, and we have an internal form we fill out, and it's got your name, address, the whole 9 yards. And then we have a form from the lab. Basically, it's just about the same, but at the bottom it has chain of custody. So in this example, it would be your name, and then it would be the nurse's name. She got the blood from you. Then she gave the blood to me. Then I put it in temporary storage. So we put it in a locked box, and a supervisor comes in the next day or whatever, and he has a log, and he writes what time it was put in there, the name, everything, and it goes to the SBI for testing. So it's not hard at all to do chain of custody and a log. I mean, they know they're supposed to do a log when it comes to evidence. It's not hard to do.
Right. Well, because what happens, from my experience, if you don't have chain of custody, you're risking that evidence coming into the trial proceedings, because you can't prove this is the evidence that was actually collected at the scene if you don't have that audit trail.
That's right. You got to have who collected it, what time it was collected, where it was sent to, and then you got a separate log that is put into, but you write it out. The supervisor writes it out in a log.
Yes, sir. Trooper, what do you also think about the evidence of blood collection for Karen Reed at the hospital? Do you have any issues and concerns about that?
Well, I know I haven't seen it, but I've heard that it said that at the bottom is not used for court purposes. I've never seen that. But if I was going to charge her with DWI, which she wasn't charged with DWI, I would take my blood kit, just as I explained to you what I would have done with the evidence, and I would have drawn the blood using my blood kit.
Mhm.
Now, I never heard anybody testify that she was impaired on the stand. Nobody. Did she have red, glassy eyes, slur of speech? Was she unsteady on her feet? I never heard any of that.
Right. So my understanding is the lab is unaccredited. So if it's unaccredited, that's like a huge issue for admissibility in a court of law. And like you're saying, the form says something about this is not, for legal purposes. So it's not accurate science being used to determine blood alcohol. And if that's the case, it shouldn't be coming in for the jury.
And to be honest with you, I've never even heard of that, because every single blood draw I had was at the hospital. And it was about 4 or 5 years ago, they passed it here where an EMS on the scene can actually draw blood now. So I've never, ever seen that on the bottom of a blood draw. That's the first for me.
What do you make of the fact that they had to keep coming back to the scene so many days and they didn't use the heaters like you described to collect the evidence in a rapid fashion, and it wasn't secured? So evidence could have been brought back from the Sally Port there in Canton back to the scene if they so desired, if somebody was wanting to set up Karen Reed. Is that not true?
I believe it was, Carl. I'll be honest with you. I'm going to call it like it is. I mean, it was 12 days. All of a sudden, God rest his soul, the chief dies, and he was told to stay out of it. And then that lieutenant just happened to be driving down the road at the same time, and they find the 45 pieces. Now, if they would have called me and said, hey, we know you're over this. Well, let me start over. I would have told Canton Police once I got there, all I need y'all to do is to write me a statement. Everybody on the scene, I need everybody's name, and I'm going to handle this. I'm in charge now. If you have anybody that comes forward, you have them call me. You don't interview them. You don't do anything. But the mere fact that chief drove by, got in the middle of it where he shouldn't have been gotten in the middle of it, me and him would have had a coming to Jesus moment, per se. Because I would have said, sir, we're in charge of this, not you.
Yeah. What about the fact that what would you have done in regards to this conflict issue? Because you have Trooper Proctor that knew some of the witnesses there to the scene that should have been ruled out as suspects.
Well, he should have told his supervisors. If I was working and I had, the same thing, I would have told my supervisors, hey, I've known these people all my life, and more than likely they would say, yeah, just hang around, but you're not going to be the lead investigator. Or they say, get back on the road and take breaks.
Right. A question here from Rachel Johnson is, are law enforcement allowed or encouraged to rely on a hunch when they don't have any physical evidence?
You can always question somebody, but it just all depends.
Lead you to look for evidence?
Say again, Carl.
Shouldn't hunches and suspicions lead you to look for evidence that otherwise previously wasn't existing? So I believe that is a true statement.
Yes. I mean, you got to follow all leads.
Right. And a lot of that is based on your years of experience, right? So based on your years of experience, what would you have done to rule out and investigate what happened to John O'Keefe? Can you just maybe summarize a few points on that, sir?
As far as ruling out what now?
Like how would you have assessed, what procedures would you have done to, when you arrived at the scene, let's say you were not a conflicted officer with any of the parties there at the scene, how would you have gone about getting statements from people and making determination of who to ask what questions and how in depth you ask them those questions, and to see if there's any motive and any deception indicated from any of those parties?
I got you. Well, when I would have arrived, the EMS would have been there. Here, the sheriff's department would have been there. depending on where it is from where I live, it may take me 45 minutes to get there. Now, we got 3 people outside, 3 females. So the first thing I'm going to walk up, I'm going to ask, do you know what happened? Do you know who this person is? And tell me what. Then I'm going to separate all 3, and I'm going to have 2 in 2 separate patrol cars. And I'm assuming they would say Miss Reed is her boyfriend. I want to deal with her because I'm the lead investigator. So I would tell her to have a seat in my vehicle, and then I would go right straight to that house and knock on the door.
Right. What would you have done in terms of like doing a deep dive on the background and stories that you're hearing out of people like Higgins and Alberts and McCabe's, and then finding out all this digital evidence is not aligning with their testimony?
Well, at the time, I wouldn't know that because I would be doing an initial interview. So all I can present to the district attorney is what was told to me on that day on tape, and if they wrote a statement. So I would have to rely on what they said at the scene. Now, if the story changed, obviously, I would have a meeting with the DA and say, hold on a second, he's changing his story, or, blah, blah, blah.
What about the fact that there was no attempts to go inside the house right away of the Alberts there to look for any signs of a fight or any kind of struggle?
I've been thinking about that, and I'm just wondering how the court would look at it. Yes, you need to get a search warrant, but to me, this is an exigent circumstance. You got a body in the front lawn.
Right.
I would ask, can I come in and look around? I wouldn't search any drawers. I wouldn't do anything. I would say, I just want to look around. Do I have your permission?
Right.
If they say no, I'm gonna say, all right, I got a search warrant on the way. Nobody's leaving this house. And then we're going to come and we're going to turn it upside down. And we're going to own that house as long as we want it until we find out who did it.
Right. What do you think about the fact that you have a detective of 30 years from Boston, same police department as John O'Keefe, and they spent some of the evening together, at least at the Waterfall bar, and he was invited back to the house, and so the defense is disputing the prosecution of whether he went in the house or not. But would you say that it's normal for a detective like him not to come out of the house, seeing all this commotion outside with the ambulance, all the police cars, and
No.
And Karen out there crying and making a lot of hysterical sounds of the trauma she was going through?
No, Carl, it's not normal. I'll tell you why. Every time you see an ambulance going down the road, 99% of the time they got their siren on. I promise you that they had their siren on. They heard it. He knows. He was in law enforcement. That's mighty suspicious to me.
I mean, he's a first responder, and he would have a duty to go out there. Somebody, I remember a comment was saying, well, if he went out to see what happened to John, he would be interfering with the processing of the crime scene or something like that. And I'm like,
no,
that's not accurate, is it?
No, no. I mean, that's like me. If God forbid there's a body in my front yard and I see it and I go out, and, try to save the person's life, that's normal.
Right.
I'm trained in CPR, or I was trained in CPR.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, wouldn't you think somebody like, if that happened in your front yard, you'd invite the law enforcement officers in your house to show that, hey, there's nothing a foul play going on in this house, and I want to make sure my name's cleared on this report.
I would tell them to come in. They can search anything they want to search. As a matter of fact, they can set up a command post in my backyard. They can do whatever they have to do, because I don't know anything about it. I'll answer any questions. I'm not going to call an attorney because I didn't do it.
Yeah, here's a good comment from Sharma Lily, Jen McCabe running into the house, not knowing if there was a murder in there. Oh, wait, never mind. He was supposedly still sleeping. So that's an interesting point, that Jen McCabe felt that comfortable running into a house when she didn't know the cause of John's injuries there.
Yeah, that's mighty suspicious. I mean, and plus the door was unlocked, correct?
That's what I recall. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
What about-
yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to switch it to this comment here from Patty P. Unbelievable, no police body cameras. I read somewhere, I don't know if it's accurate, but the leadership of this Canton Police Department is making like $200,000 to $300,000+ a year, and yet they don't even have the rudimentary police equipment that's all over across America, including small towns. Do you have any comments on that, sir?
It's funny you bring that up. I was talking to a commissioner in a neighboring town where I live, and the police chief said that there were eight body cameras they had that were not working. And I told him, I said, how the town manager called Senator such and such. There are grants out there where they give police free body cams. In Greenville, North Carolina, they gave them 200 in-car cams and 68 body cams for free. You can get them for free through the federal government. You just have to make that phone call.
Right. Well, you know what? You know what my theory is on that is that if it's not filmed, you got a reason you don't want it filmed because you're doing something that's not comporting with police protocol, and you got something to hide.
I agree.
In fact, I practiced in front of a federal judge that said he presumed law enforcement had violated the Fourth Amendment if they didn't have everything on video. And it was a rebuttable presumption by that judge because he was so sick and tired of police not having video cameras, squad car cameras, that kind of thing. And then it's all a swearing match on between the defendant and the cops on what actually happened, what was said, did they get consent or not to search, all this kind of stuff. And so to save judicial resources, basically that was put out there. And so it's just mind-boggling the kind of money these guys are making, and yet they don't even have simple rudimentary equipment that opens and shuts so many issues of litigation, both pre-litigation and motions in limine, as well as issues in dispute at a jury trial. So it just makes it look like these people don't really care about perfecting cases because they want to set the scene and dictate outcomes.
Well, and also if you're doing what you're supposed to do, you don't have to. You shouldn't have any reason not to have a body cam. I mean,
right.
It can save it can save you a complaint. Somebody complains, says you did this or that. Hey, we got it on tape.
Right. If they're going to say you planted drugs on a suspect or you assaulted a suspect and you're facing civil court lawsuits for civil rights deprivation, you got your body cam on. They're not. You got complete immunity that way.
That's right.
Let's go back to the issue with this taillight thing, Trooper. What would you say from your experience seeing all these vehicles that are smashed up on the roadways in North Carolina? Do you have any insights you can give us as an expert? What can you talk about these polycarb blends of cars in general, and then specifically a car like this Lexus GX570 that Karen was driving?
Well, he has injuries on the inside of his arm, and there is no way in this world that it would even come close to smashing that taillight out as it was presented. I honestly don't even think it even cracked it. I mean, there is no way those injuries are consistent with his arm hitting that taillight. There's no way.
Have you come across any pedestrian strikes with vehicles, sir, and any vehicle backing up? And what would you say about this allegedly 24 miles an hour that Karen's vehicle was going in those snow conditions and around a curve?
To answer your first question, most of mine were people ran over. Most of the backing crashes I had was vehicles backing into other vehicles. Now, the 24 mile per hour, you need to think about it. in the snow, those wheels were probably spinning. So they said she was back in 24 miles per hour at 62 feet. If that was the case, her vehicle would be almost close to the house. It honestly, I don't believe it.
Well, you're sort of cutting out, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Now you're clear.
Yeah. What I was saying was, I don't think they took into account her vehicle. Those tires could have been spinning at 24 miles per hour. And he said she traveled 64 feet. She would be well up close to the house if she traveled that far. I don't believe that.
Well, then just the slide factor of the vehicle, if you hit the brakes, I know there's traction control. Somebody said there's traction control actually prevents a vehicle in those kind of conditions from going that fast in reverse.
Yes, yes, there is. Yes, yes. I haven't had much experience with it, but I have heard of the traction control that will slow it down once you're backing out, in the snow.
Yeah, so I just think that if that was accurate information and not something that was wrongfully deciphered by Trooper Paul, that they don't have the time sequence down, is probably that tow truck that was spinning the wheels trying to get that vehicle up on that slick deck of that roll-off bed from the tow truck.
Right, exactly.
Was there anything about the vehicle? So just that taillight. I don't know if I assume you've seen me talk about how I think when you look at the initial condition from that video of the Karen's SUV being brought up on that tow truck, it looks like that the taillight is mostly intact. There's just a tiny little bit of white showing. And then you also compare that to how the video looked when she bumped into John's vehicle backing out of the garage. And so there was very minor damage to the vehicle, both before and after this alleged time sequence. And then at the Sally Port, it's like a completely different damage. Are you tracking that as well, sir? Like I am?
Well, if the lead investigator would have been there before he put it on the rollback, he should have been taking pictures. I would have took 50, 60, 70 pictures of that vehicle from the top to the bottom, all the way around. And you're right. To me, it looked different once he got to the Sally Port. I mean, I don't even know why they towed it to the Sally Port anyway, because the police department was recused.
Yeah, I think that came about later, but not sure. But it should have been done right away. Would you agree with that? This conflict?
Yes. I mean, basically, if I was called to the scene where the local police turned it over to us, immediately I would look at what time it is. I'd write it down. I would say, we are officially in charge of this scene.
Right.
So when I went to court, I could say, this date and this time, we took it over.
Good point here from Kelly O'Brien. Legal blood alcohol is drawn using skin prep supplied in a kit versus hospital draw that probably had an alcohol skin prep.
Well, we've got the alcohol in our blood kits, but that doesn't affect the BAC.
What can you say about the head injury of John O'Keefe? Is that something you find that aligns with a vehicle strike, like a big SUV Karen was driving?
No, the man's got two black eyes. He's got a gash at the back of his head. How did he get two black eyes? He was beaten to death.
So basically, from your experience, is it fair to say that you would have suspected something other than a vehicle strike on John O'Keefe when you saw him laying there?
Ask that again, Carl. You cut out. I'm sorry.
So basically, you're saying from the time you got there to the scene, would you how soon would you have ruled out this being a vehicle strike?
Well, I would have to look at the injuries. I'd have to do a lot of interviews. I would take my time. I would talk to Mr. Reed. I would look. I mean, there's a lot of stuff you got to do. You know, you got to see if there's any evidence by his body. You know, tail lights. That's why you melt the snow. You have to, like I said, look at her vehicle, talk to her. You know, get her side of the story, and
Right.
you know, it may take 2 weeks to charge somebody, or you may not charge anybody at all. But I would never do a fast investigation just to charge somebody. And I can assure you here, they wouldn't be putting pressure on me because they want it done right.
Now, this audit of the Canton Police Department came out today, and I've looked through a lot of that, and they really didn't get into specific cases, but they did highlight there's 5 observation and findings that they reference in this case. And one of them is the first one is first responding officers should have photographed Boston Police Officer John O'Keefe at the location where he was found before fire rescue moved him to the rescue. So that's exactly what you're saying here, sir.
Yeah, I mean, you want to know where his body is, and you know, jurors love pictures. So what I always did, which a lot of people don't do, if there's a fire truck there, I say, can you raise the ladder up a little bit? So I take a picture looking down, down on the scene. And I take several pictures looking down so a jury can look at it and see where the body is compared to the house, to the road, or whatever. Jurors want to see pictures. They want to see pictures.
Yeah, not have those is I've never seen that before. Have you seen that before in any case you've been following in either in real life or watching on any crime shows?
Have you ever seen what?
No photographs of the victim at the place?
No. And listen, that's why they gave me a real nice $500 digital camera. I never took pictures off of my personal cell phone, because once you take pictures off your personal cell phone, an attorney can get everything they want off of it. Not that I have anything to hide. It's just I don't want to turn my cell phone over. Now, there's been some discussion that the lead investigator, the text messages came from his personal cell phone. Well, here we had to sign a form back in 2002. If we're under investigation, they can ask for our cell phone bill or whatever. So that's not unusual to get texts and phone calls from a private cell phone.
Right. Yeah, they didn't even have a digital camera in any of the squad cars to be able to take those kind of photos.
Well, Carl, I was watching somebody testify today. I can't remember his name. He's been on 18 years. And he said he's never investigated a fatal in Canton. This was his first fatal. It was Sergeant, what is his name? He's a sergeant. I can't remember his name, but he's been on there 18 years and never investigated a homicide. Sergeant, it's not Sergeant Lank. I can't remember the guy's name.
Yeah. Another finding here is that all interviews of critical witnesses, including Jennifer McCabe and Kerry Roberts, should have been conducted at the Canton Police Department on January 29th after John O'Keefe was transported to the hospital. So they're in alignment with what you're saying should have happened. And I've been saying you got to secure the scene to preserve both the physical evidence, the forensic evidence, as well as police up the witnesses, sort them out, separate them, get written statements. It's another thing. Not having something either recorded or written by a witness to me is huge. Would you agree that not having anything submitted that way by a witness is a critical flaw in any investigation?
Yes, and I would have not done the interviews at Camp PD. You got too many people coming in and out. I would have done them in my car, because I don't know if Canton PD has cameras, where we can record it. But I do
Right.
know in my patrol car I have a camera, so my patrol car is my office. That's where all interviews would have been done.
Right. And here it says, next point is consensual recorded witness interviews should have been conducted. So they're saying it should have been recorded, not just getting written statements, but if you get a recording, I guess a written statement is not as important then. But having, in today's day and age, not having a recorded interview of witness statements is really a shocker.
Yeah, but I always want to get that written statement.
All right.
It's voluntary. You don't have to fill it out, but most people do. I want to get a written statement, and I want to get the interview on taped. I want to get both.
Right.
And the time,
pardon me?
And the time to do that is when you're on the scene, not 8 months later, or in some cases, 11, 12 months later before you interview somebody.
Right.
You got to be kidding me.
The MSP, so Massachusetts State Police, along with Canton PD, should have maintained a police presence at 34 Fairview Road pending the secondary search conducted by MSP crime scene units. So that's the other thing that allowed that scene to be contaminated and tampered with.
Well, if they found a body on the lawn, why would they even leave the scene? You at least gonna have a patrol car stand by until the troopers get there,
right?
And you're not gonna allow anybody to come. You ain't gonna allow anybody to leave.
If you had a vehicle that was allegedly the weapon used to kill somebody, this is sort of ties in with his next point. All video, and they highlight all is capital A, capital LL. All video footage, parentheses, files maintained on Canton PD's computer system of Kieran Reed's Lexus SUV while it was housed at the Canton PD from January 29th through 2 February should have been requested and turned over early to the Kieran Reed case to lead investigators for any action as deemed appropriate. So this whole thing about video footage being inverted and it being trickled into the defense, what do you make of all that, sir?
When I turned all my discovery over, everything that I've got would be there. We just got a new system in place a couple of years ago where you go to the office and it's downloaded to a server, and the supervisor can put it on a thumb drive. So I would have everything, and it may take a couple of weeks to get to the DA, but I'm sure her attorney would probably calling me, asking me, hey, have any idea, when you turn your discovery over? And a couple of days or whatever, I'll have the DA call you. When I turn discovery over, every time to the DA, that's all I got. Now, if I got any more in the future, I would take it straight to the DA's office. So we're required by law to turn everything we have over. And it probably would be 2 to 3 weeks, I would think, I would have everything I would need.
Right. Instead of 16 hours.
No, it wouldn't be 16 hours. I can promise you that.
Sir, from your background, you probably haven't worked canine units, but what do you think about this dog being like initially a canine trainee dog? Bugs Bunny's brother saying, wouldn't the dog make some noise? What's your take on that, sir?
Well, I've got a 12-pound dog, and every time somebody knocks on my door, she goes crazy. So, yeah, I mean, especially a German Shepherd. All those lights and sirens, you can't tell me he's not going to perk his ear, he or her's not going to perk her ears up. Right. Not believable at all.
Right. So I guess the thing is either the dog was shuttered away during the middle of the night for some reason, or else the witnesses are not telling the truth about the dog barking. It's got to be.
I think it's the latter.
Yeah.
I think it's the latter. I mean, German Shepherds are, I have seen them, I've gotten in chases where, a K9's behind me and the guy jumps and runs. And, when they bite you, trust me. And they can be aggressive if they are not trained, properly. But that dog, I assure you, heard something.
Right. What about Sean Thompson saying the call did not say officer down, police officer? Do you find that to be a point of interest if you're investigating his case and had come across the 911 call that appeared very nonchalant and referenced John O'Keefe as just like some dude laying out there in the yard, nobody that she had either love for or that he was a Boston police officer? Do you find anything suspicious about that?
Yes, here probably, because we have a lot of news media that monitors the scanner. Communications would probably call me on the way or let me know immediately it's a police officer. And I would have known probably before I got there. And yes, I don't know why she wouldn't, just say it's a Boston police officer.
Right. Do you think that the fact that they didn't have more security camera footage or like Ring or those other kind of services people have, including a police officer across the street, that nobody had those kind of things that were obtained by law enforcement? Do you think that's a critical flaw in the investigation as well?
First of all, that street would have been blocked off completely. We would have been knocking on doors. Do you have a Ring door camera? Have you seen anything out of the ordinary? Have you heard it? We would interview every single house up and down that street. Nobody would be allowed to go up and down it. And yes, we would talk to every neighbor on that house. Somebody heard something. I'm sure they heard, when EMS arrived and, when they saw the blue light. So more than likely, there's probably somebody on that street with a Ring door camera.
Right. So here
and also, Carl, you got, she supposedly passed, I think, a library, and that video's missing. And, she passed this, there's too many missing videos. That's the problem. Right. Somebody needs to investigate, where are all these videos at? Who deleted them? I think we all know who did it, but, in the Sally Port, what was it, 45 minutes of video deleted that shows the back of the vehicle? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's
unbelievable.
Well, and the officer across the street, he said, well, nothing was on the Ring camera. They took his word for it, is my understanding. They didn't even ask to see it themselves.
All they got to do is ask, and I'm sure whoever owns the house will say, yes, sir, you can see it. I mean, if you don't ask, you're never going to know. And, how about the next neighbor? How about the next neighbor? It's called doing your job, going above and beyond to try to figure out what happened. That's the bottom line. You got to figure out what happened. You got to use all resources available.
So based on the fact of what we've talked about so far, the way they botched the investigation, they didn't secure the evidence, they didn't look for collecting of the evidence, they didn't do a chain of custody properly, they didn't do the blood draw properly, they allowed a conflicted officer that knew some of the party members in the house that should have been disqualified right away. You had the rush to judgment. You basically had Lieutenant Tully telling the accident reconstructionist that this is a vehicle strike by Karen Reed's vehicle on this police officer. It was never critically questioned as to what really happened to John O'Keefe. And so how does the fact that you have dog bites as well that could not be done by a vehicle, and then you also have a head injury and injuries to the eyes that are not consistent with a vehicle strike, then you're saying because this looks like he got beat up and beaten to death, what would you say was the manner of death? I know the medical examiner said that there was no determination what actually caused like the blunt force to the back of the head. From your experience, what would you say that was? What type of thing could it have been that actually was that fatal blow or near fatal blow that struck John in the back of the head?
I'm just speculating. Obviously, I believe it's a homicide. I don't know what. It was a blunt force object that hit him in the back of the head. I saw the injury. Unless he fell back inside the house. That's just pure speculation. What concerns me is the two black eyes. I don't know how in the world you can say he got two black eyes being backed into. And, two black eyes and then blunt force injury to the back of his head at the same time. That's a beating. That's not a motor vehicle crash.
Right. What do you suspect the law enforcement not affiliated with this case and not connected to these parties that are witnesses for the state? What do you think they really make of this botched investigation, what they're doing to Kieran Reed?
They know it, but they're not going to speak up. They've probably been told not to speak up. They have shunned away all of these players involved. They're not talking to them. They're not having any contact with them. They are going out, hopefully doing their job right every day. But if I can see it with all of my experience, they can see it.
Right. So this would be common knowledge. What you and I are talking about, this would be common knowledge if law enforcement and prosecutors and defense counsel can openly talk about what's going on in this case. You believe that they'd share the same opinions as you and I have?
Well, Carl, I can't imagine going to the district attorney with this case. There was no crash report done. It was a fatal. It was a hit and run. By law, you're required to do a crash report. I can't imagine sitting on a stand, in a civil or criminal trial. The first question, one of the first questions they're going to ask is, where's the crash report? There is none that I know of, unless they did a supplement. I've not seen one. I've not heard anybody testify that they done a crash report. And if I went to the district attorney and said, hey, I think we should charge her with second-degree murder, hit and run, the DA would look at me and say, you need to be drug tested.
Right. What about, what did you make of Trooper Paul's testimony and how he talked about how the scene spoke to him and how he made this theory out and he made it out to be like it really happened. That is the honest to God's truth of what happened to John O'Keefe, that his arm must have been stretched out and then he got hit by a vehicle of Karen's and he does some kind of an orbital spin and rotation, flying 30 feet and then landing and must have hit his head there on something in the ground. Does that comport with anything you've seen on any of the cases you've investigated, sir?
No, I think he was told, we think she was backed into, let's try to make it fit the narrative. And he went by that. And the scariest part of it is he was training a female trooper. I mean, yes, look, everybody gets nervous testifying. The first, 4 or 5 trials I had, I was nervous. But if you're up there telling the truth, you're not going to get nervous. Right. So I don't know who trained him or whatever, but, him flying 30 feet from the vehicle makes no sense. I mean, there was just so much he talked about. And look, I don't want to make fun of the guy, but you're talking about sending a woman to prison for life. You better have your facts straight and you better prepare to testify. And look, if you made a mistake, say you made a mistake. If you didn't calculate it, you didn't calculate it. Don't make things up. And, you know, I've had cases, Carl, where, yeah, I could have lied and convicted somebody of DWI because I made a mistake or whatever, but I didn't.
Right.
I told the truth and they were found not guilty. And I moved on to the next case. I'm not going to make anything up. And if, you know, if I don't know the answer, I don't know it. He just has, to be honest with you, he talks a little bit faster than I do. And it was hard for me to understand what he was saying and keeping up with them. So if he testifies in this next trial, you know, he's already on record what he said. So I don't see much changing from what he's already said.
Right. I understand they're bringing another expert to bolster his testimony, but I'm like, if you had to bring in another expert, and it seems like they would have to align themselves with Paul's testimony. Otherwise, you have two different theories by the prosecution, and that's intrinsically a hot mess.
Yeah, because the defense attorney is going to say, well, Trooper Paul said this or that. Could that have happened?
Right.
You know, could it not have happened? So, it may backfire on them.
Right. That Ford Edge that showed up there in the middle of the night after 3 a.m, about 3:15, it was not there when the plow driver Lucky drove past that 34 Fairview house. And then when he came back the other direction a little while later, then there was this vehicle there. Would that be suspicious and something you want to follow up? And whose vehicle is that? And what was it moved? And why is it being moved at that time of night?
Oh, yeah, that's easy to find out. Find out everybody that was at the house, get on my laptop, put their last name in, their first name in, the city, and it'd show every single vehicle they own. That's easy to do.
What do you make of the fact that so many folks were showing up within that window, the time from 12:21 to 12:30? You had different people in the yard. You had Julie Nagel coming out there to see her brother, tell him she's staying longer. And this is supposedly the time that John O'Keefe was potentially laying in the front yard. The prosecution, I don't know if you caught that, they changed their timeline in the first trial from saying the strike happened at 12:45 to then in closing they put in some slide talking about 12:30, sort of a convoluted slide point. But they're trying to like fudge the numbers on the timeline. So did that strike you as being something that was indicating that that there's something that they're intentionally hiding?
I find it mighty suspicious that from 12 a.m. to 7 a.m., all these look, there's no butt dials. All these phone calls between 12 a.m. and 7 a.m., most people are in bed asleep. Now, my theory is they said, listen, I'm going to call you one time when I got some information. Don't pick up. And then call me back. I got some quick information I want to give you. They didn't butt dial anybody. One testified, she butt dialed 6 times. One, no, I don't. If anybody believes that, I got a bridge to sell you.
What do you think of Higgins and Albert, the law enforcement officers, being able to ditch their phones and SIM cards the way they did right before the preservation order came out?
They knew it was coming. They knew it was coming. And, Mr. Higgins goes up to the FBI academy up in Virginia with his buddy to, pull off his texts and all that. Why didn't he just turn his cell phone over?
Right.
And, he committed a federal crime.
Right.
And I believe that individual that helped him, he's subpoenaed in the next case. He better tread very, very lightly. That's all I got to say about that.
Right. All right, going to look at some questions here. Back to, they're also trying to use the blood alcohol content for Karen Reed based on the extrapolation, because she also was drinking when she got back to John's that night and was calling him, trying to find out where he was at. So what do you think about they're using the extrapolation of blood alcohol content from the hospital at 9 o'clock in the morning, roughly. And then she was drinking after, even after she went home to John's place. How's that even considered admissible from the
It's
timeline
not.
standpoint?
It's not. All the defense has to say is, do you know whether she had any drinks after 12, whatever it was?
What do you think about these judges' rulings, though? Are you shocked like I am about how she's just covering for the law enforcement every turn, that stuff that should be suppressed and kept out, and stuff that should be admitted that's favorable to defense? What do you make of this trial being so outrageous, depriving Karen's rights that way?
I've never, ever seen anything like it, ever. The ex from the FBI should be able to testify. You know, a lot of the questions that the defense asks and she sustains them, they can be easily answered. But they're having to go around a big circle and ask all these other questions just try to get to the answer.
Charmaine Lilly is asking, what do you think about the Commonwealth not using their old medical examiner anymore?
That should tell you all you need to know. Did the defense, do they have her on her list?
I'm sure they do. I don't recall, sir, but
Well, the reason that they're not, the reason that they're not having the medical examiner is that she's going to testify that the cause of death is unknown. That's why. I've never had an unknown.
Have you have you ever seen a prosecutor try to keep out the manner of death or the cause of death?
No, no, never. It never happens, but it does here.
Yeah, a number of commenters have said about how the latest iPhones butt dials are out of the question, so it's physically impossible to do. Plus, there's been reports lately that John switched off his iPhone or at least his iPhone was switched off at 12:32, and Karen was already back at his house at 12:36, and it's a 6 to 7 minute drive, so she would have left 34 Fairview around 12:29, 12:30, and his phone is still moving at that time. And to me, that's a clear-cut case of an alibi.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, Deb here is saying the blood specimens taken in the hospital are from plasma rather than serum and are 10 to 15% higher. But like we're talking, when you don't have an accredited lab to do this kind of stuff for a legal draw that's going to hold up in court, and then you have this extrapolation, and she was drinking since the time she got back to John's place. It's all junk science. There's no proper chain of custody.
If you're going to, if you're going to draw blood, you got a blood kit. Don't rely on the hospital. I think all of my cases, I subpoenaed the hospital records one time and I lost a case. You have blood kits. That's what they're for.
Right. PJ saying that Jen McCabe deleted texts and calls from John, and if I lost someone I loved, I would keep them. I struck that as very, very much a cold move and a sign of of covering your tracks. How about you, sir?
I agree. I mean, if I didn't want anybody to know I would delete it, we all know it's not deleted. It's always going to be there.
Yeah, you're cutting out a little bit there, sir. I don't know if you moved.
Yeah, can you hear me
repeat that,
now?
please, yeah, please repeat that. You're better now.
Yeah, I said I would only delete something if I didn't want law enforcement to see it.
Yeah, I just, another thing that burns my hide is this ARCA thing. I think the judge is looking for a way to hijack this defense again, and it just completely effectively deny any kind of constitutional right to present a defense by, she's going to come up with some kind of technicality with ARCA and use that to punish the defense and not allow ARCA to testify, which is, these guys are absolutely golden as witnesses. They're 100% credible. They both have doctorate degrees in their professions, and talk about the kinetic force and the tests that they ran. I mean, these guys are super impressive folks. And then when I sit there and see the prosecution trying to keep them out and then accusing them of being biased in motions hearing, this is like, it doesn't get any uglier and sleazier than what's going on here in this trial. Do you have any comments on that, sir?
Well, they testified in the first trial. There was some controversy over who paid what or whatever. They should be allowed to testify in the second trial. The only reason why the prosecutor don't want them to testify is they're going to speak the truth.
Right. What about the fact also that they were hired by the feds, and that's being kept out as well? So that causes confusion to the jury. And yet what the prosecution always argues and the judge agrees with, and she puts in her rulings numerous times, like, well, that could confuse the jury. So that's just so infuriating, because, in other words, it's too confusing for the jury if there's reasonable doubt that makes it look like the government has no case, right?
Or
So you just got to have
if
this
you're
tunnel vision of Karen Reed. It has to be Karen Reed and only Karen Reed, and anything that looks like somebody else dropped the ball, or the physics doesn't line up, the kinetic science doesn't line up, the forensic evidence doesn't line up, all this stuff does not line up, and it exonerates her. Well, that's just a distraction, as one of the jurors said. And the judge is basically saying, well, that just confuses the jury. So I've never seen this radical, insane, crazy going on in a courtroom in America.
Well, if you look at every expert witness that's going to testify, they ask them, where are you employed? So why can't they say where they're employed?
Yeah, I think they were able to say where they're employed, but I think they should be able to say, for this case, we were hired by the FBI, because that gives them instant credibility. And that's why I know the prosecution was keeping them out.
Exactly.
That instantly gives them credibility. Nobody's going to have more credibility than somebody that's, hey, the FBI is going to hire you, the U.S. Attorney's Office is going to hire you, and they're basically, that being kept out. I knew that was going to cause problems for the jurors, because they were just, even with their high degrees and their professionalism and their conclusions being so eloquently spoken and explained, I knew that the jury is going to be confused as how do they get involved? And that's not being brought out to the jury. So if something's not explained to how somebody became involved in a case, that alone can really seriously impact their credibility, right?
Exactly. I mean, if I was sitting on a jury and the expert was testifying, I would want to know, where are you employed? What's your resume? I would. But unfortunately, the jury's not going to, find out, if they testify, the jury's not going to find out who hired them.
Yes, I've seen a lot of bad stuff, sir, but this takes the cake. This is the worst I've ever seen. And I don't trust a single thing that this prosecutor does. It's so sneaky and underhanded, the way he argues stuff and says there's no evidence, the way he's trying to block and keep stuff out. You don't see it this aggravating, at least seriously, the way they're doing it. I mean, it is like it's like they don't care. And that's one of the things I've said is like, they don't care that this is going to get overturned if there would be a conviction, because the prosecutor, special prosecutor, he's going to collect all of his hundreds of thousands to try this case, and he's going to move on. He's going to secure his next position, his political appointment. And so he doesn't care how he wins the case. He can easily trample on those rights because his payback will already have been, and reward will already be paid off at that time.
Well, one of the problems I have is I think they were trying to get hold of her, her cell phone conversations with her attorney. I don't know how in the world any judge would allow that. I mean, that's scary. If I get off here and call my attorney for something, just thinking that the courts could get hold of, my cell phone bill or text messages from me and my attorney.
Right. Yeah. That is, I mean, you could just go point after point. This is the most radical extreme. Just the rules don't matter. They're just going to try to purge single thing they can out of the Constitution and just use this kind of it's basically the Soviet Union would do this kind of thing to people.
But it makes you wonder why, Carl. Why?
Right.
Why?
Because they know the truth.
I think there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes we'll never know about. I mean, why is she allowing all this? I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Kate saying, can the ARCA guys slip in that we were hired by the FBI? Let Bev say, strike it. You can't unring the bell. That's up to them. As a lawyer, you cannot coach a witness to do something that's against a court order. So yeah, as tempting as that would be, but so unless they do it on their own, they're not gonna do that. But yeah, that'd be great. Great way to get that in.
Well, the sad thing about it is you got an officer that has died and his family's never going to get justice.
Mm-hmm.
I would hate to know that was me treated that way, and my family as having to watch this sham of a trial. I really would.
So the question is why would this be happen? Well, this is the way cover-ups happen. If something is done and you got people that are politically connected, i.e. a Boston police officer of 30 years and it's happening in his house. Of course they know how to pull all the strings in law enforcement to get this thing swept under.
Well, Carl, like you said earlier, you got a dead body in front of an ex-law enforcement's home. Would you not think he would come out and be cooperative with everybody?
Yeah. He was still current. Did you know he resigned a couple months later? I mean, retired a couple months later?
No,
So
I didn't know that.
Active at the time.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So he still had his active uniform hanging up there in his closet. Still getting
What
the
a shame.
paycheck.
And listen, I'm pretty good at watching body language, and if you look at him and you look at Higgins, I can just see it. They're very uncomfortable, breathing, never looks at the jury, very, very uncomfortable.
Have you ever seen a taillight break into 45 pieces, officer?
No, I have had vehicles back into other vehicles. At, I don't know, maybe 10 miles an hour. Never shattered, maybe cracked a little bit, but never shattered into 45 pieces. And that's backing into another car or truck.
What do you make of this funeral thing that none of them went to the funeral of John O'Keefe, these law enforcement officers, including Brian Albert and Higgins?
Makes you wonder why. I mean, if they were all good friends, you would think that they would go to the funeral. I would have if I was friends with them.
How much do you believe how much time do you think it'll take before this thing gets a lid blown off and the truth comes out what really was going on here?
Well, I was on another show and I said Proctor was going to get fired before the trial started. I called it. I have a sneaky feeling somebody, I don't know who, if I did, I would, somebody is going to come forward at some point in time and give some information. That's just my opinion. I may be wrong, but I still believe the feds are looking at this case, and maybe somebody can cut a deal and we may see it go away. That's just my opinion. And like I said, I may be wrong. I know what I would do. I'm not going to say it here, but if I was involved, I know what I would do.
Law and Lit 827 is saying, what do you make of all the drinking and driving by police in this case?
Oh my God, look, I don't drink. I have seen things that the human eye is not supposed to see by somebody get hit by a drunk driver. If people could see what I saw, they would never drink another drop. It is rampant. There is no control over anything up there as far as alcohol. And
what about maintaining control of the weapons? Remember the weapon, one of the officers was left in a vehicle because they were drunk and left it in the squad car, and their badge as well?
Well, if we're off duty, where it used to be, if you drink alcohol off duty, by law, you cannot have a weapon with you, and you can be charged with it. And you're probably going to, lose your job.
Right.
These folks drinking all day long, and night. You're supposed to set an example in law enforcement. I went out every day and I tried to do my best to help people. I tried to give people a break when I could give them a break. But now when it comes to DWI, I don't care who you are. In my opinion, if you were impaired, you're going to take a free ride to jail. I promise you. So it's a stain on law enforcement. I don't appreciate it. I worked my tail off for 30 years to gain the respect I have in my community. And I still try to set an example in my community. I'm not going to go out. I don't drink, and I'm not going to go out here and drink and drive and embarrass myself and be known as the town alcoholic.
What do you think of the fact that Karen's charged with DUI manslaughter and she left a bar with 3 law enforcement officers, including one in her vehicle?
Well, that was something else I thought about today. Let me tell you what I would have done. I don't know if this is the same thing you're talking about, but I believe it was Miss McCabe who drove them back to the house that morning. And if I had smelled alcohol on her, she would have blown in the alcohol sensor. And if she blew a .08 or higher, and I determined she was impaired, I would have arrested her on the scene and charged her with DWI, because I got 2 witnesses that said she was driving.
Good point.
But, there's 2 prongs to the second-degree murder charge. The second prong is while under the influence. And I've said a million times, nobody has testified that she was under the influence. Now, you can get a bartender in there and say, hey, I served her 8 drinks or 9 drinks or 100 drinks. But you got to go to court and you got to testify she was impaired. You can't just, say she had 8 or 9 drinks. You got to prove the second part of second-degree murder, which is she was impaired, and that's included in that charge. If you determine she was not impaired, that that charge goes away. And just because you buy 8 drinks don't mean you drank them all. But like I said, you could buy 100 and you can drink 100. You'll probably be dead, but you still have to prove the person was impaired. No tests were run. No testimony, red glassy eyes, slurred speech, unsteady on her feet. None of that was testified to. And if they thought she was impaired, why wasn't she charged with DWI?
Right. Yeah, I mean, just saying it's a DUI manslaughter / murder case in the front yard of a Boston police detective, that right there tells you a whole lot. And for him not to come out of the house and respond, and I just think that the way he came across also at trial and the way Higgins came across, it's so obvious there's something else that we're not getting the truth on.
I agree. I think one of those two knows exactly what happened. Because listen, both of them changed their cell carriers. Who does that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Could you repeat that, please?
I said both of them changed their cell phone carriers in the middle of a murder investigation or a death. That's a big red flag to me. Yes, you got a right to change your carriers at any time you want to change. But daggone it, if there was a body in my front yard, I wouldn't go out and change my phone number and everything. I'd give law enforcement all they wanted. But if you got something to hide, you're gonna get rid of that phone.
Right.
And something I was thinking about today too, Carl. They said they found pieces of glass on the back bumper, and they found a hair, and they found some pieces of the tail, or something on the back bumper. If the lead investigator had went over there before it got on back of the rollback, if he took pictures, he would have had it. Why didn't he do that? Because it wasn't there.
Do you think it'd be possible for a hair sample of John O'Keefe to make it on the tail light?
No.
Miles in the cold?
No, sir.
So there's so many reasonable doubts here. Do you have any concerns that Karen Reed should easily win this case, get full acquittal on every charge?
Yes. If not guilty, she will be acquitted. And you can write this down in big bold letters. She will never, ever be convicted of these charges with the evidence that's been presented so far. Now, she did talk to the media or whatever. I would highly recommend against that. And I'm sure you would agree. If you have any questions, you can call my attorney. I wouldn't have done it, but that still doesn't prove that she backed into him. I mean, the whole case is she backed into him and caused those injuries.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way.
You know what? I just thought of this. You have all these thousands, apparently, police officers that showed up to that New York City funeral service that Higgins and Albert went to. And then you look at the way this case was handled. Why aren't there more law enforcement officers, prosecutors, and whatnot coming to the defense of John O'Keefe and saying, you know what? This case was absolutely a disgrace. The way you and your family have been treated. You deserve better. You deserve better. And the way that this court system is just completely trampled on any common decency and how they treat Karen and her rights. Do you have any thoughts or comments on why more people like yourself aren't standing up to this if they know about it?
A lot of people don't want to get in the middle of it, especially if you're current law enforcement. I mean, think about it. If you got a year or so to retire, you're not going to weigh in on this case. They may try to find a way to fire you or whatever. Of course, they can't fire me because I'm retired, so I can say what I want to say. But and something I was talking to today somebody. They're all wearing suits. In my 30 years, I had about 4 high-profile cases. Not one time did I wear a suit. We wear long sleeves year-round. I wore my uniform at every single trial I went to.
Yeah, that's as a retired officer, are you allowed to wear a uniform if you become a witness in a court proceeding?
If it's on duty or off duty?
Well, like for example, for Brian Albert, he wore that sweater. He's trying to look like Mr. Rogers, like a gentle kind of guy, a guy you can trust, and he looks so out of place in a sweater and a tie. What did you know if he'd be allowed to wear his police uniform as a retiree?
No. As a retiree, I can't wear a uniform. I'm no longer sworn. No.
Okay. Yeah. So then maybe maybe they have some kind of rule or policy, same thing up there. So.
Yeah, I just find it kind of odd. I don't know.
So what my concern is that the jury selection, if they're not allowed to really vet these people and what they have for predisposed biases and prejudices and whatnot, that they can't screen out some folks that have some kind of out of normal type views, that there could be a hung jury on this. So I think evidence-wise, I agree with you, but I think this whole thing, the way the truth is being kept out, I think there are legitimate concerns that it could not be a full acquittal, but that would be some kind of hung jury. So,
yeah. Well, I meant to say hung jury. I agree with you on that. Yeah, hung jury.
do you think? Do you think that these violations that were not followed of proper police procedure, investigation techniques, is something that is reasonable doubt in and of itself on this case? It's that egregious?
Yes, like we talked about, not securing the crime scene, not interviewing, witnesses, waiting 9-10 months to interview witnesses, not taking pictures, not going in the house, not getting a search warrant for the house. And something else I find odd is they still have her vehicle. We would have had it, I don't know, maybe a month. I would have called her attorney and said, hey, do y'all want to come by and look at her vehicle? Or whatever, because we're ready to release it. We're not going to hold a vehicle for 3 years. There's no need. None. There's no legal reason to hold that vehicle.
Yeah, that's it's like a way to punish her. And I mean, look what they did, even like on the Idaho 4 case with those 4 students that were murdered by that Kohlberger. They just completely destroyed that house where the murders happened within months of the murders.
Yeah.
And yet Karen can't get her vehicle back. That makes no sense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see any legal basis to keep it. I mean, we would have stored it at our garage. We would have the let's say if I charged her, we would have the reconstruction unit, go through it, whatever. And once we're done with it, there's no legal reason to keep it.
Yeah, so apparently there's a couple of witnesses that can testify that Brian Albert is aggressive and he's sucker punched other law enforcement officers before. So something that shows aggressive nature. What do you think about the fact that this third party culprit defense is denied for Colin Albert being a suspect, and it's quasi barely allowed so far, and it may be the door may close on that as far as that being a defense instruction for the other two, Higgins and Albert. So do you have any comments on that, sir?
Well, if the defense attorney tries to go too far, she's going to shut him down. She's not going to let the defense get in what needs to be gotten in.
Have you ever seen a case that you've been working on all your 30 years that so much evidence was suppressed that was favorable to the defense?
So much suppressed for the defense.
So much evidence that was favorable to defense that was suppressed by a judge?
No.
Do they have biased judges like that in North Carolina that you've seen?
No, because generally speaking, the defense, they get everything. When I used to turn the discovery in, videos or whatever, they've gotten everything I got. So, when I used to go to the back room to meet with the attorney, he or she's got the same exact information I have.
Yeah.
I don't hide anything. And your reputation, in the courthouse, once the attorney catches you in a lie, it spreads around real fast. And every case you have, they're going to try. They're going to trial.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just also the way the defense counsel is cut off. What do you think about these objections the prosecutor can make, and they don't even have to cite a basis for it, and the judge automatically rules, and the defense is just cut off that way?
Here, if they make an objection, they have to state why. Hearsay, stuff like that. The judge always says why he or she sustains it or, overrules it.
Right.
And that's the way it should be there. But once again, we're not dealing with a normal case.
Mm-hmm.
We're dealing with a system that has dug in and has been dug in for many, many years with a lot of players in it. And it's hard to break that wall down. Maybe this case will break it down. Hopefully it will. And the truth will come out.
I just think going back to, no, that's not the one.
And call something I'll say also, and it's nothing against court appointed attorneys. They have a job to do. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
I have never seen a court appointed attorney try a case ever. They either plead them guilty or work out a plea arrangement. Nothing against them. They're good people. But I've seen cases where court appointed attorney pleads them guilty, but my personal attorney I have would have tried it and won.
Right. Well,
it's all about the money.
Yes, I would say that, you know, the burden that public defenders have to manage their caseload, and if it's not about justice for them, it's more like a paycheck, then yeah, you're going to see a lot of people that are strong-armed into taking pleas just to keep the docket moving, right?
Right. As a matter of fact, a good friend of mine, he was a court-appointed attorney, never tried a case, ran for judge, got more votes than anybody. So he's sitting as a district court judge now. So
Hmm. Yeah, that is sort of rare to go from being a public defender to a judgeship.
yes, but the thing is about district court judges and superior court judges, most good attorneys would take a tremendous pay cut. And I'm not bragging, but my attorney, he's been practicing for 48 years. He probably makes $75,000 every 2 days. He has so many cases, and he's dwindling down. He's not going to take a pay cut for $180,000 to be a judge.
Mhm.
So a lot of times you don't have people running against these judges, but up there they're appointed.
Yeah.
And to me, that is ridiculous. If you get a judge that's terrible, it's going to take an act of Congress to even get them out of there.
Right. Circling back here, Trooper, look at this. This is part of the judge's opinion that I talked about last night, where she's denying the expert for the defense, Michael Eastern, a retired FBI agent, that could talk about the this completely botched investigation, which I call no investigation. But she said here, Easter's proposed testimony concerns basic aspects of a police investigation, which are within the common knowledge of a layperson. So basically, everything that you've been talking about tonight, that you could be used as an expert yourself in a case like this judge is saying that that's common knowledge among anybody on the jury. What do you think about that?
No, it's not. People, look, people do not, the average person does not know how a crime scene is processed unless they watch, a television show or whatever. But there's a whole lot more to it than what's on TV.
Right.
The lay person, only goes to court when they, want to fight a ticket or pay a ticket or get charged with something. They don't know anything pretty much about the court system. Whereas me and you have been there, we've seen it or whatever. They don't know that, for example, if you find a piece of evidence, you can triangulate it, which means you got to find a reference point. A reference point is something that will not move, like a fire hydrant. So you find a piece of evidence in the grass, and you start at the fire hydrant, and you go north, south, east, or west. You stop, and then you turn it around and you go back the other way, and you measure it so a reconstructionist can come back and find exactly where that piece of evidence was. A lot of juries have no idea that you can do that, and a lot of them don't even understand. So you got to explain it to them. It's hard for a lay person to know exactly how a crime scene is supposed to be investigated. That's
Right.
where the defense has to really hammer home, you didn't do this, or why did you do that? I mean, they in this next trial, they're really going to have to step it up a little bit and put that reasonable doubt in the jury that this investigation was not done properly.
Right. So here the judge is saying, through zealous cross-examination of police witnesses, the defendant can cast doubt on the reliability of the investigation by demonstrating how it differed from standard police practices and procedures, and can raise the issue of potential bias by police action or inaction, as counsel did effectively in the first trial. Well, how effectively was it if it was a hung jury, right?
Right.
And there's no expert to talk about that in the first one. And maybe there wouldn't have been a hung jury. I submit there wouldn't have been a hung jury if they could have explained that, how botched this was, because the we didn't hear from any juror that had a big problem with anything that the investigation of Proctor failed to do, other than his language, right? So here we have merely cross-examination. So my concern is that at trial, when they're trying to impeach the officer, let's say it's Proctor, former officer Proctor, or anybody else that is brought by the prosecution, on cross-examination, you're going to have all these objections by Brennan, so they're not going to be able to get out a lot of these type of points.
Well, Carl, I'm sure they can get a copy of the SOP for the State Highway Patrol. I'm sure it is public record, and they could go in there and, policy and procedures like the Bible, you got to follow it to a T. And they could go through that policy and procedure on investigating a crime or murder or whatever, and try to point some of those things out that they didn't do. Like, I can promise you in the policy and procedure, it says when you go to a homicide, you're required to take pictures. You're required to interview witnesses at the scene. You're required to do this and that. I think, the policy and procedure is the route I would go.
Yeah, I'm sure they will do that. But my concern is, if you're just limited to cross-examination on that witness and you got the prosecutor objecting, you're a lot of these questions will be objected to. And the thing is, they can also just poo-poo a lot of this and say, well, yeah, that's what the manual says. That's what the SOP says. But you know what? Under situations like this, we don't have to do it that way. And that's normal policy. We don't exactly follow all these because we go with what we think, the evidence is leading us to do. And so these policies are not, absolutely mandatory. And that's the way we do it here. So they can take a lot of the sting away from any efforts to try to say how bad this was botched. And so anyway, just relying on cross-examination and alone. I mean, if cross-examination is so much an effective tool for prosecution witnesses, then there should never be a case where the defense has to present any evidence. They should never call their own witnesses then, if that's such a standalone tool of effective defense.
Well, Carl, if they introduced the policy and procedure in the evidence, would she not have to allow the questioning of the officer?
Yeah, I just think she's not going to allow them to extrinsically prove what the standards are. They can question about it. And, Lally will say objection, and it could be any kind of whacked out objection. I guess in this case, it'll be Brennan. And we'll never know why it's being objected to. And the judge doesn't have to explain why the ruling is keeping it out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't
trust anything. When you have the prosecution going this extreme step to get somebody convicted, they're going to do the same thing they're doing in court as they're doing outside of court, which is to deny every opportunity they have for the truth coming out. And when you got a judge that's just rubber stamping and never saying overruled for these prosecution objections, and only merely says, I'll allow it. And, it's like, well, I guess I have to.
Yeah.
She comes across so biased, so much like, hey, defense is wasting everybody's time, members of the jury. So let's just, I got to do this for the sake of letting it have it look like it's fair, but having it actually be fair is not a concern, because she's already proven herself to be guilty. So let's get this show on the road and get it over and done with and get her convicted. So,
right. Well, I think, if you get a good jury up there that can see through it all, because look, once the defense attorney asks a question, you can't, she sustains it, you can't take it back. And that jury just heard that question, but it can't be answered. That could be some reasonable doubt. Why is the judge not allowing him to answer that question?
Right.
If I was on a jury, I would be like, why can't you answer that question? It's a simple question. Yes, look, I agree. They have a uphill battle to deal with her, but I think in the end, I think the jury is going to see right through it, just like the first trial. There was so much that was botched, so much that should have been done that wasn't done, and hopefully the jury can see through it. I mean, it can get frustrating, and I've read a lot of people's comments of them being depressed and can't sleep and all this and that, but I'm not depressed. I'm sleeping well because I know pretty much she's going to be acquitted. And I base that on what I've seen testified to. And if it's presented, merely like the first case, it will be acquittal. Now, something that really upset me, and I don't get upset, is when they pulled that vehicle in there and showed that vehicle inverted. That was dirty. That was dirty. You don't do that, Carl.
Yeah, they're saying that's the way it was recorded. And they didn't know about it, and that's just one of these deals that they just stumbled across. And so
yeah, but the prosecutor should have said, the jury, just let you know the video is inverted, but obviously he's not going to do it. But it's better for the prosecutor if he would have done it at the beginning and not let the defense attorney call it out. Also, the tow truck driver, Lucky, the defense had to go talk to him. The prosecutor didn't want him to testify.
Right. That's all hiding the ball, hiding the truth coming out. So, yeah, it's just here again, the court says that the court finds that the expert testimony is not needed for the jury to determine whether or not the investigation was compromised by any failure to follow procedures or pursue other suspects. So pursuing other suspects, if somebody like you doesn't come in and say, this is how the investigation was flawed because there's other suspects that have not been properly ruled out yet. Okay. And there's no way you're going to get a Proctor or any of these other folks that were law enforcement on this case to admit they dropped the ball on pursuing other suspects. They're just not going to do it. And yet this judge is, well, that's enough for the jury's going to get that.
Yeah, I didn't mean the tow truck driver. I was talking about the snowplow driver who said he didn't see a body. What was your last comment? I'm sorry, I was thinking about that.
No, that's fine. No, I took it you mean the snowplow driver as well. So we're on the same sheet there.
Yeah.
The whole thing about where it says that the jury, an expert testimony is not needed for the jury to basically understand that there was an issue on failure to follow other suspects, leads on other suspects. So there's no government witness that's going to testify and admit that that's a botched investigation because other suspects should have been pursued. They're going to say, no, there's no other leads. This comports with the way we do business as a standard law enforcement techniques. And that's a judgment call on whether somebody's a suspect or not. And I still stand by that judgment. So it's like they can basically take away a lot of the zinger dagger testimony that somebody like you could bring forth, that this former FBI special agent Easter would testify about. So it's completely different. So you have an expert law enforcement officer saying, this is the evidence we got, and this is how we collected it to make Karen Reed look guilty. But you can't bring a law enforcement officer as a counterweight by the defense to say they didn't collect it the right way, and how they collected it and how it all is compiled does not point the finger at Karen. It points the finger at other people that have likely done something to hurt him. So it's so one-sided and uneven that's just what's so infuriating.
Yeah, and the mere fact, 16 hours you're ready to charge somebody with only interviewing three people.
Wow.
Are you kidding me? Look, if I would have done that, they would have probably took me off the case and said, what's wrong? You're going to charge her and you've interviewed three people. You don't have any pictures of anything. You've not even been to the scene. We're going to take you off the case.
Yep. I'm going to see, I'll go through, look for a couple more questions here before we close for the night, sir. I know it's late there. You're on Eastern time. Thank you so much for.
I got plenty of time. Go ahead.
Okay. Looking for a red question mark here. There's been I don't know if have you seen the comments here that have flashed up on the screen where they say they appreciate so much your assistance on this case?
I can't see the chat.
Okay. All right. People are definitely appreciating your commentary, so as well as I do here.
And I was thinking earlier today, I was watching TV and I was thinking like that jury that was dismissed who was overheard in some American Legion talking about the case or this or that, but they never found out, who reported. They should have had a hearing on that, don't you think, Carl?
Yeah, it's bizarre. What how do you think the prosecution comes across just in terms of his persona and his demeanor?
Well, I have a DVR, and this is how I'm going to watch the case. When the prosecution speaks, I'm going to fast forward it, and I'm going to listen to the defense attorney. I don't want to hear anything the prosecutor has to say. I can't stand his voice, and I'll just fast forward it.
Yeah. A cat lady is saying, can the defense still use Easter as a consultant behind the scenes to help with questioning? Yes, they could.
Sure.
They could even call you if they wanted to.
Sure. They could call anybody.
Right.
But she won't allow Mr. Easter in, but she'll allow some jackwad from Florida who supposedly took molds of the dog. Now, look, that's going to be a good test. Now, that one I will watch the prosecutor. This guy took molds of the dog 2 months earlier. The question they're going to ask him is, where's the dog? How do you know it was the dog? He is going to get severely embarrassed. You mark my word. He's going to hate he ever got involved in this trial.
Yeah, I think that dog bite and say, well, these don't line up with the impressions of the dog's teeth that were found on John's arm. That's like so much a impossibility. If you're taking like distances between the teeth and all that kind of stuff, you don't know whether it's the teeth or the claws or what angle the mouth was to the arm, and there's no way to come up with some kind of like exact science on how this bite tore this piece here when the mouth was like so, and then when the arm must have moved, and then the teeth must have bit a second time, and at this location, it's just so much quackery, I think.
Yeah, and then dogs' teeth move. You may have one fall out, or dogs' teeth move, and it's been 3 years or whatever. I mean, this guy's going to have to answer where that dog is and who owns the dog.
Yeah,
I would hate to be. I would hate to be in his shoes. I can tell you that. I would have. I don't care if they paid me $1 million. I would have not done it because he's going to be severely embarrassed.
Yeah. Well, I think, then you also have chain of custody doesn't matter to the judge here. The prosecution doesn't need chain of custody. Right. So how would they do how would they prove that this is the actual dog? Right.
Right. I mean, you would have to go to that dog had, got a rabies shot or whatever in the past years. You'd have to find out when the dog was last seen there. I mean, and I don't even think that would even fly. The dog's been gone 3 years. I mean, I don't know how you could prove it's the same dog. And I look forward to him testifying because that's going to be one of the highlights of this case because I don't know how he can prove that is the dog.
What do you think of Rainy Day Girl saying everyone claims that Colin left the house at 12:10? A bunch of drunks really recall that precise time. They don't even know how much they had to drink yet. They know exactly what time Colin left the house. Do you find that suspicious?
Yeah, and didn't somebody testify they had that, what was it, that Life whatever app on their phone or something to that effect?
Yeah.
You know, I think one testified she took him at 12:10, the other one at 12:10. Mighty suspicious.
This is Laura Lee Smith saying, if they can prove she said, I hit him, and I'm afraid she's going down. What do you think about what you heard on the audio and some of the visual we see on Karen there at the scene there where John's body was found that morning? What do you think there's any that's incriminating to Karen in any way?
Well, see, Carl,
pardon me?
That's why you interview those people immediately and you have it on videotape. And they may come back a year or two and say, she said, I hit him. Well, you didn't tell us on the tape. Let's roll the tape.
Right.
Now, just cause she said, I hit him. Yeah, my ears would perk up, but I still got an investigation to do.
Right.
I've got to prove it.
Right.
So to quell all that, if they would have interviewed her immediately, they'd have it on tape to play before the jury.
Right.
Instead of taking somebody's word for it. That's why it's important when you do an interview, if you don't have a video camera, use a regular tape recorder. But, we have cameras everywhere where we can interview people.
Do they have it in North Carolina where the judge decides who the foreman is and then decides by picking numbers that are not verified by any of the attorneys whether she's actually reading out the numbers that she says she grabs?
The judge determines the foreman here in North Carolina.
Really? That's
yes, sir.
Odd. I've never seen that before. And then when you don't have transparency on what numbers are a primary juror versus an alternate.
Right. And I was thinking today, they were doing jury or whatever, and people may disagree. But if I was in her shoes, I would definitely want I would want an attorney in that jury box, because that attorney knows the law, knows what's supposed to be done. I would try to pick me an attorney. That's just me. You may disagree, but that's just me.
What do you think about all these law enforcement having their own lawyers there, watching them testify, coaching them? And Higgins is still active law enforcement. He's got a private lawyer sitting in there with him. What do you think of all that, sir?
Yeah, and he went up to the stand. I've never seen that. When they were talking about,
the judge called him up and actually was like sort of telling him what to do to help defend Higgins. It was really bizarre. And he sort of like went up, what am I supposed to do? Talk to Higgins now about what? I mean, there's some kind of crime he committed and I'm supposed to advise him what?
Never, ever seen that.
RN is saying, I think the defense, the two neighbors that Chloe attacked. Well, the problem is the judge won't allow it. That's helpful to the defense. So the judge won't allow it.
Now, I'll say this, Carl. If somebody was trying to pin it on me, I would have my attorney in the courtroom. But as far as him coming up to the stand, no, that would never happen. If somebody was trying to pin it on me and I didn't do it. But there's not much he can do, sitting in the gallery.
Yeah, I just think if you're only accused by defense counsel, that's not really much of an accusation. And if you're telling the truth.
Right.
You know what I mean? In other words, if they found a dead body in your house and you opened up the house to the cops to search and all that kind of stuff, and you knew upcoming for trial, the defense was going to say, "You're the one that killed him. You're the one that killed him, Officer Carolina." And so I don't think you're going to go hire a defense lawyer, would you?
No, no, because I didn't do it.
I'm sorry.
No,
I didn't mean to overspeak you. Go ahead.
no. I wouldn't. You know, I wouldn't go hiring a defense attorney. I mean, you know,
I'm talking about, I'm talking differently than if the prosecution is accusing you of something. That's a whole different story. That's the point I'm making.
Yeah, the prosecution accused me. You're not going to write an attorney and say, you got my attorney. Nothing to say.
Sir, there's a question about Cellbrite. Have you ever used Cellbrite in your investigations?
No, that would be for the reconstruction unit. I have never used it. Have no idea how it works. Never used it.
I'm just going through some more questions here. I'm going to do one more question here, then we'll call it a night here. Is there anything, I'll ask you this. What about, somebody's talking about Jen here. What did you think about Jen McCabe's testimony, credibility, and denying that she deleted the butt dials, and the way she was aggressive in responding to cross-examination questions and glaring at the defense and telling them, "You can proceed now," or things of that nature? What's your overall impressions there?
She was very argumentative. She was very hostile. She appeared nervous. She, I think, made a statement in front of the grand jury, and then she had time to think about it. She changed her statement. And listen, I'm going to tell you right now, if anybody out here thinks that you can butt dial somebody 6 times, I think she testified 6 times. I hope you never serve on a jury if I get charged. Please tell them you don't like law enforcement.
What about her obsession with John coming to the house on 34 Fairview and doing all this calling and dialing and texting? And do you think she was really wondering where he's at, or do you think that looks more like suspicious planting of a diversionary type story?
Yeah, I think it was diversionary. I mean, you know, like I said 100 times, from 12 a.m. to 7 a.m., look at the text, the phone calls. You know, who does that?
Right.
Most people are in bed. I mean, you know, I'm not saying it can't happen, but to me, it's highly suspicious just the phone calls in itself. And then you got 3 people said they butt dialed. What? I mean, come on.
Right.
I mean, there's no way I can hang up the phone here and butt dial you without clicking an app and clicking a number and calling you back. There's no way possible. And what that tells me is they all got together, they got their story straight, and that's what they come up with, because they didn't want to know who they talked to at a certain specific amount of time. I think somebody said, do I think the feds are still looking? I can see chat now. Harry's mom. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, I believe the feds are looking into it.
What do you think about the 2:27 a.m. Google search? How long it takes to die in the snow? Do you believe that's an accurate timestamp that Jan McCabe was searching that?
Well, I don't know if she done it, but it was on her phone.
Right.
And the extraction showed that it was deleted. Mm-hmm. And then there was 2 more. It's 6 whatever, and they weren't deleted. It was on there at 2:27. They didn't just make that up out of thin air.
All right. Well, with that, sir, do you have any closing comments before we end the night? We're just gone over 2 hours here. Again, appreciate your wonderful assistance in explaining things that the Judge Cannone thinks that jurors understand everything that you talked about here tonight, and there's no way that they can't understand it. And so any final wrap-up summation here for you?
Yeah, well, the defense needs to come out swinging. And they need to come out swinging hard. No mercy on any of these witnesses. They need to jump right in on them, and they need to review their past testimony, and they just need to keep hammering, and don't let up. And let the judge sustain or whatever, but at least get everything out there. They need to come out swinging because, they've been treated unfairly. And the benefit of the doubt always goes to the defendant. And, like Mr. Betterow, they wouldn't even let him, be part of the team. He's an excellent attorney. He should have been allowed. I mean, if she wants 20 attorneys, she should be allowed to have 20. She has a right to defend. And it's a shame that we've come to this. Law enforcement in general, before this happened across America, no, we didn't have 80%, approval rate, but, generally speaking, most people had, got respect for law enforcement. That was in any profession. But it's worldwide. And it has really put a dark. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now I can.
I said this case has gone worldwide, and it has put a stain on law enforcement. You got people I've seen even scared to approach a police officer or a trooper or whatever, and that's a shame.
Right.
This all could have been avoided by simply telling the truth.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you again,
one
sir.
last thing.
And maybe we'll do this again if you're willing to do this as some different junctions of the trial. And,
and
go ahead.
Yeah. One last thing before I go. I've seen a lot in my career, a lot. And I always did the right thing. And I'll never forget when I first came on, my first sergeant came on in 1979. I was 8 years old. And he said, let me give you some good advice. If you think about doing something wrong or something criminally, would you do it if I was sitting beside you in this patrol car? And I'll never forget that till I die. And I always treated people with respect. And did I have to go hands-on and, step it up a notch? Yes. When I'm out here at 3 o'clock in the morning by myself with a drunk driver, and the closest help I have is 45 minutes away, and he wants to fight in a ditch, you gotta know what to do. And the biggest thing is coming home every day, try not to get hurt, but treat people fairly.
Right.
I mean, that's the biggest thing. And, I didn't care how much money you had. I didn't care what type of car you drove. I didn't care who you'd be surprised the amount of people I'd stop. They'd say, yeah, I know such and such and such. I'd say, okay, I'll be right back. I went up to the vehicle. I gave him a ticket. I said, well, maybe you want to call him and help you out with this ticket. I don't play that game. We issue clear-cut, substantial violations. And I can honestly say that I did my job to the best There's a lot of politics involved. I stayed away from it. And I sleep well at night with my dog, knowing that I always did the right thing.
Right. Well, appreciate your outstanding service. And yeah, if we had law enforcement of your character and caliber up there in the Canton area, Kieran Reed would never been arrested. I'm absolutely convinced of that. So keep speaking out. Thanks for supporting justice for the Kieran Reed family. And we'll be talking again soon. And thanks for all the comments you made tonight, as well as also on the chats, commentary on other live streams. So thanks again, sir. And everyone, thanks for joining this effort to help show the truth, show justice, be the sunshine on all the corruption going on there in Canton. And we'll be back to talk more. They've had the jury selection starting today. I understand 2 jurors were selected, and then we'll cover more of that in the coming days here. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off, and you all have a good, safe night. And officer, you want to stay on a minute while I exit? We'll do some final comments.
Thank you, Carl. I appreciate